Good afternoon and welcome to another video with a guy and his projects. Again, we're working on this F250 Super Duty. Just trying to get it up to par. Today, what we are doing, you're gonna watch and hopefully I can help you out a little bit, is we're replacing the upper and lower ball joints. We're replacing the inner, I don't know what you want to call it, dust cover seal. We're going to replace the U-joint for the four-wheel drive, to lock the axle in. We're going to replace the inner seal for the locking hubs. Even though I don't have locking hubs, I'm going to replace the seal. We're going to replace the actual hub bearing assembly, and I think that's actually it. It's quite a few parts. There's some thrust washers and crap in there we're going to replace as well. But that's what we're doing, and we're going to do it now. So I just finished the passenger side. And I was honestly kind of intimidated getting into it because it just feels like a big job, but it really isn't that bad. I mean, it took me several hours on that side, but I was taking my time, chilling out, had no idea what I was doing, had no idea how aggressive it was going to have to be with the hammer, so don't be afraid to be aggressive. But now we got the thing system, now that we have it figured out, we're going to go ahead and do this side, so let's do it. The ball joint is going to have to come off, so go ahead and remove the ball joint. Take your cotter pin, bust loose the castle nut, and then you're going to go ahead and don't be afraid to hurt this thing. Use your 3-pound hammer is what I'm using, and just beat around on the knuckle. Essentially, these things get seized in place from just use, so by beating on it, you can kind of shock load it. And then if you're replacing it, which I am, not today, but I am, you can go ahead and beat on the bolt right there as well. That'll pop that loose. Now you can come up here, work on your ABS lines, track it all the way up to the connector and pull it loose, get rid of this cable. There's this little bolt here holding it in place so that it doesn't get yanked out. Go ahead and undo that so the cable is now free. The back of the knuckle, or on the caliper, sorry about the camera angle, you don't need to take the brakes off, just these two bolts right here. There's one here and one below. We're going to take the whole entire caliper assembly off. You don't need to do this in pieces, just one big piece is all you need to do. Keep it easy on yourself. There's one bolt, that's the upper one, and then you're going to do the lower one. And then you should be able to wiggle this whole thing loose off the rotor, just like so. Grab yourself some twine, some wire, or one of these hooks I'll link in the description below, and hang this caliper safely out of the way where it's not putting stress on the brake line. This works out great. You can now remove your rotor. You may have to hammer this a little bit depending on where you live. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and take off the hubs, the locking hubs. I don't have the factory vacuum hubs. The previous owner took those out and put in these Warns. I believe they should be semi-similar. After you get the cover off, there's going to be this weird round spring clip type thing. You'll understand when you see it. Go ahead and fish out that first part, and then you'll twist it just ever so slightly to get it out while you work it around. It's pretty easy, you just have to see it to know it, I guess. At this point, I find it easiest to put these Allen bolts back in place, just 2 of them. What that's going to do is allow you to grab them and pull the rest of this hub assembly out, like so. It's much easier. A quality pair of these is insanely helpful. I tried the cheap ones, they weren't working out that great. I found my good quality set and it worked much better for that C-clip. These I could not for the life of me get my fingers around them and grab them, so I used a couple of picks which worked out fantastic. I would recommend it. You have a washer and then a hexagon, pentagon washer, whatever the hell that is, and another washer after that. All that can be removed. At this point, you have 4 studs holding the hub bearing assembly in. There's little nuts on the back side right here, 4 of them. You're going to go ahead and bust those loose, use some leverage, a breaker bar, whatever you got to do. These are on tight. As you can see, I forgot to eat my Wheaties this morning, but you know, you keep working at it and you will get it. Just break it loose, pull them off. and you have 4 of them, so it doesn't really matter as far as I know what order you do them in. I just did one after another with no particular favoritism towards which way I wanted to go. So there's the back side. Now we're going to do the front side in the upper one. Again, I didn't get it on camera. This was a long day, but you'll see it when you get in there. They're the only nuts there. Leverage, man, leverage. Yeah, all right, so that's 3 of them. A little quick tip, if you leave these on a few threads, don't pull the nuts all the way off. You can hammer on the stud / nut to get the hub off later, because it's probably going to be seized on pretty good. I did on this last one. I left that nut on there to hammer on. But that being said, the Timken hubs assemblies that I purchased came with new studs, so if you're not too worried about it, you can just go ahead and beat right on the stud as well. Again, this is a 3-pound sledgehammer, just sat there beating on it, or you can also just beat straight on the hub assembly itself. Do it with an outward angle if possible. It'll help you out just a wee bit. And you can see here we finally broke it loose, and I'm able to pull it off. And those 4 bolts that you see coming with it, that is what those nuts were on. Again, I use my picks to get this washer off here as well. And now you can go ahead and grab a pry bar of some sort to push on the U-joints from behind. Find whatever you can for leverage to get this shaft out. Once it's broken loose, you can use your hands and you can just pull out the axle shaft. Keep in mind, if you're doing the passenger side, it's going to be about 4 times as long because the diff is on the driver's side. Now we can jump into your ball joints. Number 1 is the top. Go ahead and pull that cotter pin out and remove the castle nut. This one wasn't too bad at all. The bottom one, however, was a little bit tighter. Again, should have eaten my Wheaties this morning, but I obviously didn't. So you use whatever measures you have available or frustrations, and the old boot up its ass. You know, sometimes that's the most effective method, and sure enough it was. Same thing with the tie rod. You're just going to beat on this a little bit, try and shock it out of there. That may or may not work. Once you beat on it for a while, you can hammer down on that upper ball joint castle nut, especially if you're replacing the ball joints like I am here in this video. But you can try just shocking it from all sides first, and then pop, it just falls right off after you beat down on it a little bit. You can now take your nuts off and drop this at a controlled speed. There's your bottom ball joint and your upper. And then your whole knuckle assembly should fall out just like so. Voila. We're now disassembled. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick cleanup because this is all dirty and nasty. It's not necessarily necessary, but now to take the ball joints apart, again, you have your snap ring pliers. Take this little snap ring off, and be careful, wear eye protection, it can fly. You're going to take the grease zerks off if such were supplied on your old style. And now the fun part, you can never ever find the right attachments the first try for these ball joint press. This press has every accessory I've needed for ball joints so far. I'll link it in the description below. It is a very good set as far as I'm concerned. It has worked for everything I've needed, from my F250 to my Nissan Frontier to my Nissan Sentra. So seems to be a great kit. My brother's used it on his Jeep Cherokee as well. So you're gonna pull that bottom joint out, boom, voila. They say it's not recommended to use your impact on these ball joint presses, but it's gonna take you 3 weeks to do this by hand. So just keep that in mind though. Now we're gonna do the other ball joint, same fashion, possibly a different accessory if needed. Usually removing them takes very few of the accessories. It's putting them back on that you have to get creative sometimes, as you'll see momentarily. Again, use the impact at your own discretion. I'm not a mechanic. I have no mechanical training or experience in the professional manner, so what you see me do is probably never the proper way unless I'm just lucky. Keep that in mind, guys. And out comes that ball joint. Alright, same deal. We're going to take this and go get it cleaned as well. That's the old ball joint. Yeah, it's time for a replacement. Those are the new ones. And we're going to go ahead and clean this knuckle out nice and purty. And this is your upper. And of course, anytime you're using one of these, you wish you had like 5 hands just so you could hold all the pieces together. It's super frustrating. I cut a lot of this out because, you know, didn't think you guys needed to see me keep dropping stuff. Also, finding better attachments rather than the ones I had. Sometimes the one you think will work doesn't work. And exactly. Definitely helps to have a couple extra hands. However, it is doable by yourself, especially if you have larger hands like I do. And then just go ahead and suck that joint right back in place. Just make sure that the stud of that joint is going through the hole at the top, so you're not trying to compress something that's incompressible. That's what I'm doing right here, just making sure it's lined up. Always line the stud up with the hole. So I've debated on a lot of tools that I've purchased whether they're actually worth it or not, and the general consensus is usually they are worth it, but not all the time. So here, this ball joint tool has saved my buttocks a few times over now, so I highly recommend it. We're now pulling our bottom ball joint in. And this one we got to do twice because the jaw of the press wasn't long enough to get the proper ones in there, so I had to get the ball joint pressed in somewhat before I could fit the other attachment on. Pain in the butt, but so much cheaper than taking it in. So much cheaper. Just this portion right here, the ball joints, I was quoted $800 to do at a shop. $800. This took me probably both sides. I spent most of the day in the garage, but I wasn't in a hurry, so it was worth it to me. Okay. Now you're just looking in the package for that retaining C-clip, whatever the heck it's called. And just slap her on. Once you put these on, I like to take a little screwdriver and just slide it around a little bit just to make sure it's seated all the way around. Typically, if it's not, it won't slide. So if it slides around, you know that it's typically all the way in and good to go. I'm just closing off this vacuum port for the automatic locking hubs, as mine are not automatic. So this hub doesn't need to be open. Previous owner left it open, whatever. Now it's not. Alright, so now the U-joints. That's your little dust seal bull crap. Get rid of that. So the U-joints, these have little C-clips or moon clips holding the joint in place. Super frustrating to get out. In fact, extremely frustrating. But it does work. A little screwdriver and a little hammer, and you just gotta go at it for a little while. And yeah, I was getting frustrated by the end of this one because you pretty much need a flathead screwdriver with a very sharp corner on it in order to get in there. And all my screwdrivers are kind of worn out, but this is what you're looking at when you get there, that little C-clip. And then you can just pop it out. If it's not in the vise, it'll probably go flying, actually. Most of them did. Okay. Yep, so now you can just get your screwdriver in there and pull that out. Do that on all 4 of the joints. All 4 ends of the joints, I should say. The joint. Alright, so now to get the joint out, you put the opposite side, the perpendicular side on the vise just to rest it there, and then bang on the yoke itself. Not the ball joint, or not the U-joint, but the actual yoke. And that'll force essentially the yoke to move down and the U-joint up. And then you can remove the cap as we did. So as you can see, it didn't damage my yoke. I don't know how else to get those off. But that way worked out the best. So then you've got one out, and you just do it again. Only this time, instead of resting the yoke, you're going to rest the actual U-joint on the vise, or whatever you have to support it. And then again, just continue banging away on that yoke, and take each cap off as you can. Some of them are pretty seized, but all of them ended up coming off. Sometimes just the sheer willpower, man. By the end of a long day, because I did the passenger side before I filmed this side, and it was a frustrating day. Everything on this truck is super seized. It's been a blast working on it. Alright, there's your U-joint, capless U-joint. So get rid of that. Now we're going to get rid of this seal, which you're pretty much just going to have to hammer on it. I tried using the screwdriver, and the screwdriver's going through, so pretty much just banging on it with the hammer was the best route for me. Once you get that off, ditch that crap, and there you go. New U-joint's gonna go in. We're going with the Moog, Moog, whatever the heck they're called. Comes with new C-clips or moon clips or whatever these are. A lot easier to put these on than it was to take them off. So you're going to go ahead and remove 2 opposite caps, whichever 2, to start. Slide it in, try not to get it overly dirty with the new grease. You're going to gently put 1 cap in there, make sure your needle bearings are all straight inside first, and then just gently tap them in with the hammer to set them so that the needle bearings don't fall out. Once both sides are set in place, go ahead and use your hammer and wail on them to get them in place. You just don't want those needle bearings to fall at all. And then you're going to push these far enough that the slit for the moon clip, I'm calling them moon clips, I have no idea what they are, can slide into place. Boop. Do that on both sides, and then you're going to take the other 2 caps off and do the exact same thing to get the other yoke in place. So put the yoke in place, gently put the cap on, gently tap it in place so your needle bearings stay in place. Same thing with the opposite side. Gently put it in, tap it in place. And then once you've got it tapped in place, you can go beast mode. And if you're not careful when you first start putting these caps in, you can get a needle bearing out of place, and that'll completely destroy the U-joint and all the work you've just done to get to this point. So just be aware of that. Slow-mo reflex action right there. Check that out. Okay, this is just your dust seal. It's really not even necessary per se. It just protects the axle housing and what's in it from dust, but it doesn't even seal technically. If you look down there, it moves back and forth. This is a tool I highly recommend you buy if you're doing this job. I'll link it in the description below to Amazon. It's worth it in my opinion. This is the only time you'll ever use it, is if you're working on this truck, but it was a lifesaver. It would have been much more difficult without it. So I debated and debated on whether to buy it or not. I finally bought it, and I don't regret it. So you just put that on the seal, and you're just gonna hammer away until it starts to look good. Until it's seated in place. Took quite a bit of hammering, but you'll get there. Alright, so now we're assembling everything back together, and we're gonna go ahead and put your knuckle back on. Slide those ball joint studs up and in place. Put your nuts on. Bottom and top, top and bottom. So when you go to tighten these up, there's a specific way, and Ford has it, and it's something about you tighten the bottom one to so many foot-pounds, tighten the upper one to so many foot-pounds, and then go back down and tighten the bottom one more. I don't have a torque wrench big enough to go on it, so I couldn't follow their instructions directly. So I just spent quite a bit of time fiddling around, trying to play with it. Here, by the way, when your bottom ball joint starts spinning because there's no pressure on it, just grab a jack, lift up that knuckle, and that'll put pressure on the ball joint so you can tighten it. But anyway, as I was saying, the knuckle should spin fairly freely after your ball joints are tightened, and if you tighten them incorrectly in the incorrect sequence, then it will be stiff as heck. And like I said, I didn't have a torque wrench that fit, so I kind of just guesstimated. I just kept wiggling as I tightened them, and I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Tighten the bottom one, loosen the top one, tighten the top one, loosen the bottom one, back and forth, back and forth. Just moving the knuckle the whole entire time, trying to find that sweet spot where I mean, it's going to have resistance. It's not going to fling freely, but yeah, just back and forth trying to find that sweet spot. Once you do, go ahead and I had to get some leverage from the truck itself, but at this point it did. It spun very freely, some resistance of course, but freely nonetheless. If you don't and it's super stiff, you're going to have memory steer, as in the truck, the steering wheel won't return to center while you're driving, and you're going to be over and under steering. I went ahead and greased that spot you just saw. I don't know if you're supposed to, but I did it anyway, and I have experienced no bad side effects as of yet. And I've been driving this for about 3 months now, 4-wheel drive and 2. So you can get this seal back in place just by hammering it with this thing. Again, I highly recommend buying it for the money. It's worth it. Once you get that in place, you probably should have done this earlier, but you know, whatever. Go ahead and get your upper ball joint taken care of. Okay, so now we have our axle shaft in, both the seals in. Now you're going to take this bad boy. Again, I don't know if you're supposed to grease it, but I greased it. Again, I've had no bad side effects from having it greased. So I'm going to say err on the side of greasy. This is my new Timken bearing. Oh yeah, bearing hub assembly. Things are heavy duty. Again, I will link these in the description below. All the parts I will link in the description below. So this came with new studs, as I mentioned. That's why I wasn't afraid to beat on the old ones. This yellow O-rings for your automatic vacuum hubs, which I don't have the vacuum hubs. I still put the O-ring on anyway. It's up to you. Might as well. If you have the locking hubs that are still vacuum actuated, then definitely put that on there. Alright, so we're just taking all these provided studs and tightening them down. I don't have a torque spec for you. I just went as tight as I could with the channel locks until the channel lock started slipping. Remove your dust cover. And put your, whatever this is, dust shield back on place. Just make sure it's in the right. That dust shield will be going towards the front of the vehicle. You can just slide it in, line it up, your ABS brake line, make sure that's in place correctly, and slide it in. It's not going to sync up dead straight on or dead with the knuckle, but you're just going to put these nuts in and then snug it up as you go. I would recommend doing the top corner of one side and the bottom corner of the other, just to snug the knuckle up. And once it's snug, then you can go ahead and torque everything up. Again, I would torque in a star pattern as well rather than box pattern, but that's up to you. I'm not sure what the service manual says. I was an idiot and didn't actually read the service manual for any of this. I just kind of went at it. So we're just tightening up the nuts on the back of the hub assembly. And then we're going to go do the nuts on the other side as well. Okay, so now we're going to put our washer back in place. These are new. I'll link the parts in the description below. And we've got the 3 washers, and then we have our lock ring, snap ring, C-clip, whatever. And you're just going to slide that in place. Make sure it sits in the valley for it. If it doesn't, you're going to have problems. Then grease this up real nice with some moly grease. Anytime you got metal on metal, it's a good idea to have some grease in there. And you're gonna go ahead and slide that in. I wouldn't slide gently, I had to kind of pop it in, but once it popped in, it went in just fine. Go ahead and take your 2 Allen bolts back out, and you're gonna put your ring back in. Easiest way was to angle it in and just angle it all the way around as you feed it in. It was not difficult, different, but not difficult. Yeah, just like so, all the way in, till the whole thing's in. Grab a little screwdriver if you want, just to make sure it's sitting in there. And you can put your locking mechanism cover back on at this point. Alright, so now we're just testing it to make sure everything spins freely like it's supposed to when it's both locked and unlocked. When it's unlocked, your axle shaft should not spin. When it is locked, your axle shaft should spin. So on with the rotor, and then the caliper. Aren't you glad you didn't take it all apart? Just 2 bolts to go back in. 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom. You're going to get them nice and tight, torque them to your manufacturer specifications, whatever those happen to be. Voila. Alright, so now you can put your tie rod back on, same way it came off, just line it up, put your castle nut on, tighten her up, and then find the hole for your cotter pin. Slide it in, make it look pretty, or as pretty as it can on a 20-year-old truck. I do have a video where we replace those tie rods. Check that out if you're interested. Now your tire can go back on. Voila. Give her a spin. And oh man, she spins free. Look at that. Alright guys, if you stuck around to this point, kudos. Your attention span's longer than mine. I've edited this thing and I've watched it like 5 times, and half an hour long, that's a lot of time to watch a very boring video. But you have a step-by-step tutorial on how to do this from a non-mechanic's viewpoint. Remember, I'm not a mechanic. I'm not professionally trained. I have no professional experience. I have nothing at all to qualify me to do what we just did in the video. So copy me at your own discretion and your own risk. It's been about a month since we did all that stuff, and this truck is driving amazing, like really. It drives smooth, it drives sweet. I have since replaced the tie rods. Check that video out as well as the front springs, the rear shocks, the front shocks. So pretty much the entire suspension and steering system post gearbox has been replaced, and this truck drives very, very swell. I mean, it's still bumpy, you can see it's bouncing, but it's a Super Duty, so it's supposed to. So because it's a Super Duty, do not be afraid to beat on this thing. You have to use a hammer, it's a Super Duty, it don't care. Stay tuned, guys. This truck, the whole goal behind this truck is that I want to depend on it to get me and my family out to remote areas camping without having to worry about not getting home. We are getting really close to that point, like really close. So stay tuned. I'll probably post a couple videos of us camping and whatnot coming up here soon. As long as COVID bullcrap doesn't shut down the forest or keep it shut down. We'll see. Anywho, thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, make sure you hit that like button and hit the subscribe button to see more. I've got a whole playlist on my channel dedicated to this truck, so check them out. Stay tuned for more. We'll see you next time.